we were asked as presenters to present our work in terms of a solution. Well, that's probably stretching it a little bit in terms of what we're doing in building information system tools in the project Biopharma that I'm going to tell you about. But we are going a long way, and we do have a lot of concrete actions that are addressing the issues of putting protected area information together, making it more accessible, bring it into decision making and into the work we do in protected areas. So I work for an organization called the Joint Research Center. I don't know if you've heard of that before. If you haven't, it's kind of the in-house science service of the European Commission. I'm based in Italy, but most of my work is across the areas where the European Union works in cooperation for development with countries across the world. If you put the European Union with its 28 member states together, you'll see that it's one of the biggest providers of official development assistance. So within things like the European Development Fund, up to last year, 22.7 billion euro, and the next program of that going over 7 years, 30 billion euro. So it's about development. It's not about protected areas, it's not about biodiversity per se, but it's about development, primarily in the ACP countries, Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, but not exclusively. Out of that, a lot has been spent directly on nature conservation, biodiversity. You'll see there 500 million euros since 1985 has been spent on biodiversity conservation, including direct support for parks, direct support for communities living in and around protected areas. 850 million euros directed to biodiversity and integrating it with ecosystem conservation, with socioeconomic development and poverty reduction. So that's why we are involved in this. We want to understand, is that money being prioritized, spent well, and to combine it with all the information that we have about biophysical outcomes, about wildlife, but looking at it in the context of development. The focus we look at is where a lot of that money is spent, which is this network of countries, 79 countries of the ACP region, which have a trade agreement, a cooperation agreement with the European Union. 700 million people plus, and over 7,000 protected areas. So within that, we're trying to manage all that money, all that complexity, all those different ecosystems, all the different stuff that's going on. And we need information to do that. Now, do we have really a lack of information? And that's what I've heard people saying a lot already at this conference. I'm a geographer and information systems specialist, a geek, if you like. I like to play with maps, remote sensing, satellite data. And we live in a world where we are monitoring the Earth and the people that are on it more than we've ever done before. I assume most of you will have one of these devices, which is really cool. Apparently it also makes phone calls, and it tells people a lot about what we're doing as we move around. We are being monitored. We have the ability to monitor. We can do stuff. So there's more and more information, but then we hear that there's not enough of it available to make decisions, and to make decisions specifically in our case about protected areas. I've not been to a World Parks Congress before. It's been really exciting. I have an awful lot to think about on the plane home, which luckily is quite a long one. But looking back over the history, every 10 years or so, does anybody have an idea what there were 4 of in 1992, just over 30 years ago? What there are now 40 million, what there are now 1 billion of, and 40 million of in 2003. Huge increase in things. That's the number of websites that are running. Okay, so we've just hit 1 billion websites, yet we're still here complaining about a lack of information. Something's not right. There's a lot of stuff out there, but it's not related to what we need to make effective decisions. So 1 billion and 1, because we've just built another website. So we're also part of that problem. But the aim is to try and pull things together. So the Biopharma project, Biodiversity and Protected Area Management, is a program funded by the European Union, the European Development Fund. We run it jointly with IUCN, and it has 2 main components, one on capacity development for protected area management, and the other on information system development, and that's what our role is. So we're trying to build a reference information system for biodiversity and protected areas management. I said to you before, I'm a geographer. I do mapping, land cover change, habitat assessments, all that kind of stuff. So we've got 3 pillars in the project. And the first one, ecological characteristics, we're pretty good at that. You'll see lots of examples of people doing that type of change analysis, change assessment, monitoring, and so on. But the European Union, in funding BioPharma, has been very specific about the fact we have to look at these other elements that are relevant to protected areas. So we have to look at protected areas and livelihoods and understanding those interactions and getting the data. And as I said, it's a bit of a stretch to say that we're understanding those interactions, but we do have a clear message and we need to pull that data together. I just went to a session, kind of by accident, as I was trying to find this room, next door about socioeconomic studies in the Great Barrier Reef. And lots of information there that might be models for how people can go and collect and put together socioeconomic information in a consistent and coherent way, because our problem as well is having this done in a way that is comparable across this very diverse region. And then the other aspect you'll have heard a lot about as well is about management effectiveness and governance. So we're putting together that system, a kind of one-stop shop for biodiversity and protected areas information. It's about integrating what's already there. There are some information gaps, and we're trying to address those, but really it's about what's there, putting it together in better ways. And we're working at different scales. At the global scale, we're a funding agency, so we're interested. One of the first questions we have is who else is funding stuff in this protected area or in this region? So we've just we're working on a project to map where money is being spent by the major donors. We have in double figures for the major donors. We've mapped 5,000 projects in 6,000 locations. And you can go into this system and take a look at who has paid for what, where, and for what theme. So that's the first question for any donor in making sure that they're smart in how they spend their money. Then we have at the global level, again, some simple socioeconomic indicators, and now we're trying to drill down to local studies. So we have the sort of population density, transport infrastructure, GDP, human footprint, etc. And we can do that already, and we are doing that. We have a system. One of the drivers of the development we have is we built a system called the Digital Observatory for Protected Areas. Again, that's something you can find out more about at the EU Pavilion. And that is really about comparing and contrasting protected areas. In this case, we have a human population density pressure for a country. You can look at a protected area and see how it compares to others. And then down at the very detailed site level, then we have information. We've just launched a study to look at very detailed context assessments in protected areas in Central Africa and want to roll that out, which includes a very strong socioeconomic and livelihood component. A lot of talk at the conference and in general about ecosystem services and their role. There's a lack of information, so we've built a tool, espmapping.net, which is supposed to act as a repository for all that information, to bring it together so we can start to actually generate indicators that decision makers can then act on. That's all great, but in conclusion, I think a key message for me is that we have all this technology, we have lots of data, we're struggling to pull it together. One of the main reasons we struggle to pull it together is because not everybody wears that t-shirt. Not everybody loves to share. And there are usually very good reasons for that. We need to understand those, we need to get people together, and that's why our project is not just technologically focused, it's very much about networking, and our colleagues in IUCN are doing an excellent job in pulling that together so that we can pull that into this system, have agreements, and get people to share the data that I'm convinced is out there.